Okay, here we are. I think we're live, and welcome, Mary, to the show. And I think this is my first YouTube live, so I've tried to have. I've been doing the conversations in LinkedIn, but I thought, okay, let me have the platform expand to YouTube,
Yes.
and it was an intent to actually have a good conversation around um, with people whom I've inspired and who I've learned a lot, and
Yes.
I've seen your work through years on the side of leadership. So
Yes.
today's topic is about uh, um, purpose-driven leadership.
Yes.
And we have our special guest today, Mary Gregory, and I think I'll let her do the introduction. She's been an executive coach and on leadership, and especially the purpose. And her focus is on how do we drive purpose. When leadership is all about not just authority and taking control, but how do we have an empathetic and more purposeful leadership. So she's been doing a lot of sessions and workshops, and she has her own company, and I think she's been a while she's doing this. So I want to hear from her on her journey, and introduce to the audience. I'm excited, and once again, happy International Women's Day to all the women across the world. And
Yes.
what other and it's a history women's history month. So what other time is to have you part of this conversation,
Mm.
Mary?
Mm.
Absolutely,
That's
wonderful
very
to have you.
that's very kind of you. Thank you, Naga. And it's really, really lovely to be here. So thank you for inviting me to be here. Particularly, this is an important weekend. It's International Women's Day was yesterday. It's Women's History Month this month. So a lot of sort of highlighting of women and the need for gender parity, actually. So if I'm honest, I would like to say I'd love it if there wasn't an International Women's Day, because what that would mean is that we'd achieve gender parity. There wouldn't be that need to keep highlighting women's contribution, because the genders would be equal in that respect. But to give you a bit of background as to who I am, so I've been working in the field of leadership development and personal development for many, many years now. I actually did my coach training way back in the 90s. So coaching then wasn't really talked about much, or no one had really heard of it, although it's obviously, as a word, it's really reached its tipping point, I would say now. And there's lots and lots of coaches doing some wonderful work out there as well. But I am a real stand for helping leaders be as authentic as they can to be able to navigate the challenges they may face in their businesses, particularly in these days of such complex and volatile change that we seem to constantly be going through. So helping leaders stay in tune with their purpose and their values is really important, again, to help them navigate their ego. And that's one of the elements that I obviously wrote a book about that. That's an area of interest for me. But purpose is such a useful, almost anchor, I would call it, in terms of helping leaders have a frame of reference that they can navigate against when everything else is so uncertain around them. And my experience, as I say, goes back many, many years, coaching lots of different leaders from uh, big organizations, big corporations, but also in the public sector as well, both nationally in the UK, but also internationally too.
Yep.
And I have a special interest in women leaders, which is, again, why it's so great to be here today.
Yep, wonderful. And I'm honored to have you and talk about the leadership. I think your experience goes way back. I know you had a varied experience, especially with different industry too. I mean, be it Rolf Lauren, Lauren
Yes,
or Tesco,
yes,
and then Mind Gym. So
yes,
there is a bit of diversity in terms of the people you've worked with and you've coached,
yeah,
and you've been in the part of the boardroom and seen how things happen,
yes,
and try to bring the best out of the leaders. What are the best practices, or how do they navigate the conversations, when it comes to really executive leaders, right? So
yes,
yeah, I mean, definitely I would like to deep dive and understand more for to share to the audience. And a lot of women who are probably who face everyday challenges in their workspace, or want to get to the leadership, but then they probably have some limitations, or they have self-doubt. You talked a lot about self-doubt and how do we
yes,
overcome that. So maybe we'll
yes,
deep dive and explore. So
yes,
okay, my first, I mean, before we get into being Women's History Month, March being Women's History Month, and we are celebrating the International Women's Day, and the theme for this year, 2025, is accelerated action, right? So,
Yes.
what comes to your mind? I wanted to just dig deep on the theme, right? Accelerated action. So, what comes to your mind when it comes to accelerate, and especially being uh,
Yeah.
Women's History
Well,
Month?
I think, and this links to the UN. You mentioned the UN before. This links to the UN program that I've joined as well,
Mm.
in that it is all about let's get on and actually do some things now. Let's stop talking about it and actually take the action, because we don't know what difference we're going to make until we take the action. But I think my sense of it is it's not just about women taking the action; it's about all of us taking action in terms of contributing to the world being more equal and more diverse. And it's not just about women. Women, we need men as allies. So there's a lot of focus around allyship and how men and women can work together to create workplaces that are equal.
Absolutely. I think I was talking to Marianne Segat earlier.
Yes,
She
great.
this I mean we talked about the book authority gap, and I think especially she said how it's important for men to understand, and I think
Yes,
how do we have a collaborative I mean more, of course, definitely it's an education for every woman, but then it's importantly for the men to actually
yes,
recognize the unconscious biases, and how do we actually bring the women together, right? And
yes,
more from, as we talked about when we actually first started connecting on, especially I was talking about the zero sum game she was
yes.
giving example about. So yeah, good to hear that. I mean, you said UN, right? I think I want to bring that up for the audience to know, right? You have been selected as a delegate for the 69th session of the UN
I have. Yes,
UN Women Right Commission. So I
yes,
think probably
yes.
just let's get a glimpse of, and I know that probably it's very initial.
Yes, so it's the Commission for the Status of Women 69.
Okay.
So that means they've had 68 conferences
Yes.
before this one, but this is the current one that's literally just started. Well, it's actually starting officially tomorrow, but we had a training session last week, and again, they are talking about how can we tackle some of these. I mean, a lot of the issues that we face as women are systemic. Them very much embedded in how we are as a system, how we are as a world. So it is about what are the actions we can take that will start to try and shift some of these things within the system. And so, it doesn't have to be a massive action. It can be, I mean, first of all, there are 6,000 women in the UK alone participating in this program, which in itself is phenomenal. So that will make a difference in energy straight away. But then, if you get women collaborating, sharing ideas, innovating, you are much more likely to get some consistency and some action going than if you don't. So that's the start of it. And we're literally just starting out on it. So I'm not sure how it's all going to pan out, but we are participating each week. We're participating in 4 hours of sessions. And I also know for a start that they've started almost a notice board type situation of wants and offers. So where people might be working in an organization, they have a need for some coaching. So who is a coach that could contribute something to that organization? So all sorts of things started already. So it's a very rich community.
Right, kind of train the trainer, or probably you have a coach, but probably how do you enable them to do better in their organization, to
Yes,
bring women forward, or
yes,
what identify the areas of improvement in an organization,
yes,
right? Yeah, yeah,
yes.
absolutely. And I mean, definitely, it's a privilege for you to be part of it, and definitely here. I mean, I'm happy to hear that firsthand.
Yes.
Your experience from that session. That's absolutely.
Yes, it's so far it's been incredibly inspiring, very moving,
Mm,
and shocking as well. Because even though I was that some facts and figures that they were kind of sharing, there's something like women are 51% of the population, and yet 83% of women live in poverty around, and this is around the world.
mm.
That's quite shocking that women carry the brunt of so many things that aren't working in our world. And so just to make a difference there is going to be phenomenal.
Yep, yep. Any small step everybody can contribute is an
Yes.
important to bring.
Yes.
Great. I think I mean, I would like to deep dive or get more a little bit, maybe take to your past. So, um, talk about the Ralph Lauren experience, or
Yes.
probably Mind Gym, and how
Okay.
you've been in the talent transformation, or probably talent development and coaching for a while. I would say from the time, as you mentioned in the introduction, that sometimes the coaching was not a term which is very prevalent earlier. So from the time you've been doing it, so I think it's amazing to
Well,
and start a organization and probably do it on your own,
yes.
businesswoman, and
Yes.
you have won the Businesswomen Award in 2024, the Best Businesswomen Award in 2024 in UK.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's an amazing feat to achieve
Yes.
after so much of hard work. So I would
Yes.
like to understand the journey. Right, it's an inspiration for a lot of women,
Well,
even men.
my my journey goes back a long way. So, I've always, I started out in the health service here in the UK, working in psychology, and then moved into the corporate world in the 80s when I moved into the travel industry, and I ended up heading up learning and development for an overseas travel company, and then moved into being an independent consultant following that, and started my own journey of development at that time as well. So I did an MSc in change agent skills and
Mm,
strategies, which was a transformational experience, because not only did you study an MSc, which in itself was academically challenging, but also you had to do a lot of work on yourself. So to do the work, and this kind of is one of my foundations, is that I believe as a coach, as a consultant, working with people to help them develop, to help them to grow, you're in a very privileged position, and you've got to really honor that privilege of supporting others by making sure that you're dealing with your own stuff as well. So one of the things I learned from my MSc was, go sort out your own baggage in order that you can be clear to support your own clients as well. So that's been a fundamental really to my own journey, to making sure that I stay and keep that sense of okayness around myself in order to help others. But then I've worked with some phenomenal companies, and phenomenal is a word I use a lot, I notice. But that's because I feel I have been very fortunate to have some great experiences and some less great experiences. Although I would always say they were good learning experiences, even the things that might not have worked so well for me, where there might not have been such a good match values wise, it's still been very rich learning as well. But working at Ralph Lauren and Tesco, both were fascinating cultures to work within, very, very different types of cultures, although both retail. One was at the luxury end,
right.
one was obviously grocery, fast moving consumer goods end. Although, I mean, I'd say at the time I worked in Tesco, they were doing all sorts of things as well as just building and running supermarkets. But yeah, it gave me lots and lots of insights around what are the things that work and what are the things that don't work when it comes to leadership.
Okay, so how was the leadership by then? I think I know today we are talking about, especially after COVID. That was one of my questions I have. I think maybe I'm just trying to jump to
Yeah.
that and try to bring relevance to what you made. The uh, when it comes to purpose driven or more empathetic, so I've seen that change from
Yeah.
the organization and the leaders, how the way look, because COVID has definitely had an impact across the globe with everybody.
Yes.
Especially a lot of
So,
people moved, right? So I've seen that kind of the shift of more being empathetic, or trying to understand what's happening in the other person's life, and
yes.
really focus only on the work and trying to get it done. So that mindset, as I felt that it's more of shift, which I've seen from a lot of people after the COVID. But how has been the experience for you? Have
So
you?
my experience then, in answer to that, is that compassionate, empathetic leadership where you are in touch with your humanity and you treat your people as human beings rather than machines working for you, has been going on for a long, long time. And certainly, I'd say, certainly way back in the 2008 crash, do you remember the global crash,
Yeah.
financial crash that took place? Um, it was accepted that there was a new normal where things were going to be volatile, complex. And the way to see yourself through that was to be able to engage with people, to be able to understand that we can only work with what we know right now. We can hold a vision of where we want to be, but we can only deal with what we're dealing with right now because we don't necessarily know what's going to come around the corner. But to take people with you, and this is, I think, where my beliefs and passion have grown up, is that you have to build good relationships with people. And as a leader, you've got to be mindful of the impact you have on others. And empathy and compassion, I'd say from way back then, were really, really important. I think the difference that happened then with COVID and what happened during that time period was the whole conversation around mental health
Yep.
and being much more aware of people struggle mentally and emotionally, and it can cause breakdown, which puts even more emphasis on how you're being as a leader, because the way you show up as a leader, and the more senior you get, the more visible you are, which some leaders sometimes aren't conscious of. If you're very senior, you're going to be very visible and having a bigger impact on the organization. The more conscious you need to be of how are you impacting those around you, and being aware that if you turn up in a bad mood, and we're all human, we can all have days where we're out of sorts, but if you're in a very senior leadership position, you've got to really be committed to managing yourself, your mood, growing that self-awareness, because self-awareness is really at the core of being able to be effective. If you're not conscious of how you're being, then it's very difficult to change how you're being or to adjust it depending on the situation. And I suppose that for me, it's just made it even more important, this whole awareness around mental health and being more mindful of how you are with people and how you impact them.
Yeah. I think I know it's a journey. I think when it comes to leadership, as you said, a lot of times, I mean, you also talked about some of the good experiences and some of the learning experiences as well from your own journey, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think how do you build that? I think recently I reposted a quote from my one of the executive director women. She was talking about how do you build that muscle to actually,
Yes.
when whatever the learnings you are, or probably
So
not
how
every
do you
time
build the muscle?
successful. Yeah. So it
So
was.
yeah, so for me, it's use the gym analogy. You wouldn't go to a gym and work out and expect yourself to have a fully taut, really
Yes.
fit body. You have to develop a discipline to go 3 or 4 times a week and keep working out, and eventually you will see a change in your physique. Similarly, as a leader, it's having a really positive practice for yourself, be it that you have a daily practice where you might meditate, for example, and get yourself really present and calm your limbic system so that you're not on reactionary high cortisol type
Mm.
behavior. So having a daily practice, being willing to engage in your own development, being willing to seek feedback and not be defensive when you receive feedback, because it's all about learning and keeping growing. And, I think when I was in my 30s, I had this view of, oh, one day I'll have arrived. I've now come to the conclusion that you do arrive at certain junctures where you think, oh, I can do this now. And maybe 10 years ago, I couldn't do that now, but you're still on an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
You can't really if you want to be a leader at the most senior level, you can't afford to
Mm.
slacken it, I don't think. And some people might be watching this thinking, oh my god, that sounds awful, I've got to keep working on myself. There's something about, make it something that's fulfilling for you to be working on. So this is where we come back to purpose, which is where we started. Is
Yep.
that you've got a clear purpose as a leader, working on yourself, you are doing it in service of fulfilling your purpose. And your purpose is all about contributing to others and making a difference in the world as a leader. It's not necessarily all about making money. That I'm not saying money isn't part of it, because organizations do need to be profitable.
Yes.
But that is not the fundamental purpose. The purpose ultimately is to offer whatever service it is
Mm.
they're offering. And if they're doing it really well, money will result in them
That's an
being
that's an outcome.
successful. So I kind of have it that, it becomes part of your sort of way of being, your lifestyle, that you do the work on yourself because it's serving you to serve others in that way and fulfill your purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful thought and way to look, right. Unless you focus on your own well-being and also in your mental state, and you're able to actually think sane, and then uh, get that into action, and probably
Yes,
be more empathetic. And especially, I think I learned this psychological safety like 15 years back, from one of the coaches which I was
yes,
talking to. So it was so powerful that time, how do you have a team, and then you build that psychological safety, right? And then when you put effort on you, it would definitely reflect on
yeah,
people around. So yeah, I think it's, and especially when it comes to the workplace, like the leader has to definitely the constant learning, and how do you reflect that with people you're working is very, very important. I mean, that then it's an energy, right? So you, it just spreads.
yeah. I think there's something there about the leader going first. That if you want to create psychological safety, then there's no good pretending that you never make mistakes. We
Yeah,
all make mistakes. So there's something about saying, "Oh, I didn't get this right," and owning up to it creates that safety that it's okay to make
I
mistakes or
think
to fail in our on our team. And it opens it up to being a learning situation rather than one where we're just denying it all and not learning anything, just repeating mistakes. So by the leader going first, they can really enable that psychological safety by how they show up in their very being.
yeah, and even asking questions, not just one part of is to look at, okay, fine, I everybody makes mistakes, but the other side
Yes.
is, okay, even if you do not know, and probably not all of them, it's practically impossible for a person to know everything.
Yeah.
So every day there is a new learning. So even on a specific situation, if you do not know, just raising the hand and say, hey, I
Yes.
we don't know at this point in time, but I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful quality to have, and then try to.
I'd actually say it's not just practically impossible, it is impossible to know everything because there is so much in the world that we don't know. And there's so much of our potential that we haven't accessed either, which is why being on that ongoing journey is
Yeah,
so
unless you
invaluable.
are an AI.
Unless you're AI. But I think even AI has
Yes, you
limitations.
have to constantly train.
Yeah, because AI is only as good as the human beings that are putting into it. So,
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think I wanted to talk about your book. So let's get to that. What
okay.
brings. I know that you have, through your journey, definitely you had a point. Okay, fine. I think I've done enough in this coaching and leadership, and probably I've done a lot. So why not you just put it into a book, which probably for the audience to look at or learn, and start implementing in their works, in their leadership journey, right? But
Yeah.
why did you choose ego as the key,
Yeah.
the
Yes, I know.
name
It's
of
a
the
good
book, and
good
then
question.
and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. So I sometimes wonder, why did I choose ego? Because some people love it. They say, oh, because ego is so much at the root of what's going on, and absolutely it is. And then other people think, oh, I don't like that you've chosen it.
Mhm.
They don't. They're almost repelled by the word. And then I think, well, actually, if people are repelled by it and they're not wanting to look at themselves, maybe they shouldn't be talking to me about things. But so why did I hone in on ego? I think because uh, you know, I've had my own spiritual journey going on as well, and I think what I've learned from that is that what really gets in our way is our ego. And we are, but having said that, it's that whole paradox of ego that it can get in our way, but it's also fundamental to who we are. It's our survival strategy. So I talk about ego being like that massive survival system. It's a defense system that when we're experiencing some sort of anxiety, um, we've got learnt ways or decisions that we've made from when we were very young as to how we're going to deal with ourselves in that particular moment. Um, and so it supports us on one level. It
Mhm.
helps us be effective and survive. But on another, it can inhibit how we show up. And I talk about, and so the reason I focused on ego, because that's your original question, I'm going to have to just sip of my tea, just one moment.
That's okay, absolutely fine. Yeah, this is supposed to be a cafe log. That's all.
Oh, it's cafe. I've got my cup of tea. That's very good. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. So what you asked, why ego? The reason I chose ego is that I do think it's there. So what? It's just there all the time in some shape or form. Yes, there are times that we will transcend it and not, we'll do something different, we'll be different, because it affects how we're being in the moment as well. So I'm not saying we can't transcend it, but it is with us a lot of the time, and it's a paradox from that point of view, because we can't live with it, we can't live without it. It helps us survive. So why I wanted to write about it, and it links, I suppose, to my whole thing about leadership being an ongoing journey, is that if we can start to build awareness around our ego, then we've got more chance of transcending it in the moments where we need to transcend it. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I talk about ego traps in my book.
Yeah.
And one of the ego traps I have is, and I own this one, it's all about, pleasing others, being a classic people pleaser. And
that's very common, right? That's very common.
It's very, very common, and also very common. It's common in men and women, but it probably there's more inclination that women, we are brought up to be polite, to facilitate other people's needs, blah, blah, blah. So in that respect, it has supported me to have the career that I have, because I'm a really good facilitator, and I'm really good at listening, and I'm really good at being able to provide a good service for people. So all of those things come from you could say, my ego trap of people pleasing. But when it's really limiting is when I might, and I've certainly had to learn to this is when learning to transcend. I've had to learn to transcend that element of myself in my job, for example, being able to challenge a group on a dynamic that if I see a dynamic that's going on in a group workshop, for example, the people pleaser in me won't want to say anything. But the coach in me, I have to transcend my ego and actually say, I'm noticing this, and offering it as feedback and challenge if necessary. So that's why it's useful to learn about ourselves and be able to challenge it. And also, you mentioned as well in the pre-questions you sent about games, we get into these ego games which are driven by ego. So again, being able to recognize that and navigate our way around that so that we transcend the games is really helpful. Stops the workplace being such a toxic place.
Yes, and I'm just trying to get to that specific question, right, on the games, because it's a. I mean, I think that specific chapter is very powerful. I mean, your book.
Yes.
I definitely, that's why I wanted to deep dive on that games part of the the whole topic, different types of games which actually
Yes.
we get trapped. So maybe just why not?
So I would say, in terms of what I've got in my book, I've really simplified the whole area of games down, because if you want to read about games in depth, you want to go and read Eric Burns' book, which is called The Games People Play. And also what I talk about in my book is the Karpman drama triangle, which is developed by a psychologist called Dr. Stephen Karpman, who is still with us and still writing other books. But it's a really I like it because I think it's very easy. It gives us some kind of it gives us kind of archetypes as to how we can be in relationships, different roles that we can take in relationships. And what I've endeavored to do is to try and develop it from, this is what the archetypes are in terms of persecutor, rescuer, victim. And then this is what you can transcend them into in order for it to be more authentic and more helpful and less ego driven. So
yeah, I think a lot of inspirations you've driven from different books. I think I will get the origin. I mean, drama triangle is what one of you are talking about, Stephen.
Yes, I'm talking about Stephen Karpman's drama triangle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that is a game. It's a classic game that you will have, the different roles that we play, and we can probably all relate to them. So the persecutor is when we're really going into, a very angry parent, telling people off, criticizing them, disciplining them.
Mm.
And then, but it's coming from power over the other person. But similarly, rescuer, which is another of the archetypal roles, is all about, oh, let me take care of it all for you. I'll make you a cup of tea. You'll all be fine. Similarly, that's also coming from a power over role, even though it's appearing a lot more nurturing and a lot kinder. And then that just helps to perpetuate the third role, which is victim. That, oh, poor me, I come helpless. Haven't got any power. Those two roles perpetuate that victim type mode.
I
But
think
we dance around them. That's the thing. We don't just stay in one role. We dance around them.
I think it's this relates to the other topic, right? Especially, I read this book. I'm actually still finishing it, Brain Warriors, which is from Dr.
Yes.
Heyman. So he talks about, I mean, that's more on the how your brain really works on
Yes.
the situations, especially, and he talks about how you actually has to. It is more. He talks more on the parenting and how the child, how do you influence that? And he talks about this rescue. I related to the helicopter parents.
Yes.
He says that how I mean, the helicopters usually tries to come and rescue people when you are stuck. So
Yes.
parents who are actually trying to do that on a day-to-day
Yes.
basis for their children, they don't enable them to be more independent. So he says that if you're constantly doing that, I think it's applicable everywhere. Like if you can't,
Yes.
let's say you have a team and they have a problem and you have to let them solve and try to learn and solve for it, then you go on
Yes.
fixing that problem, right? Then which means there is no learning there. So
Yes.
as a leader, you need to be really aware of when to step and when to not.
Absolutely, which is why I talk about the authentic triangle, which is rather being persecutory, try just to be challenging, challenge from a place of curiosity. So, rather than saying, oh, what you're doing there is wrong and foolish, actually say, what's going on? What's your thinking behind the action you're taking right now? That's like being a curious challenger.
Mm.
And then also, rather than rescuing, again, going into that coach mode of asking open questions so that the person starts to develop their own thinking, accesses resources they might not have thought or realized they had. Much more helpful than actually going in and rescuing people or just telling them off. And then in doing that, you're encouraging them if they're feeling like a victim. And we all go into victim mode. So, it's something we can all do at different times, depending on what our circumstances are. But if someone's being supportive and asking us questions, that will help us think of answers, which then gives us our power back. So when we become a chooser, when we're making choices and creating solutions for ourselves, we start to get our power back. It's when we feel helpless that we don't have any power.
Yes, no, I think you're right. I mean, it's more of again, it requires a kind of understanding,
Yes.
and how, and you talked about the game the ego plays, and how do you conquer that? I mean,
Yes.
every
Yes.
time you need to constantly put an effort and be aware of the ego, and then
Yes.
try not to ego get over you, and then
Yes.
and
Yes.
check.
Yes. And we're all vulnerable to ego. I'd love, I've been doing this stuff for a long time, as you know. Doesn't mean I haven't got an ego. We're all in ego a lot of the time. In fact, they reckon 80% of the time we're in ego. So it's worth knowing that, so that we can be more mindful around it. Particularly if you're going to go into a conversation as a leader at work, a performance type conversation, which is quite a tricky conversation. It's useful to know what are the things that might trigger you. So what might trigger your ego into jumping into that game, and what can you do to make sure before you get to that meeting you've prepared yourself. And it's not just thinking about what am I going to say and making notes. It's also managing how can I prepare my state so I stay neutral and I
Yes,
stay feeling okay. Yeah.
I think it's a meditation.
Well, I think meditation definitely helps.
or if you want to do a yoga or
Yeah.
What
Or
can we call it? Exercise.
managing your breathing, I think, which is a very simple form of meditation.
Even in exercise, I think somewhere
Yes.
you actually, I mean, that requires a dedication, and probably
Yes.
you're distracting, and your mind and body are working together to actually do something which is not related to the work. So maybe
Yes.
you get that mental space, and you then come back. Probably you have a
Yes.
clear way of thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
So
that
there's
was
something there about, there are things you can do in the moment to manage your ego. Like taking a deep breath can help you stay grounded, stay in that sort of I'm okay, you're okay type
mm,
place.
mm,
Um, and there's things in terms of how you live your life. So you make sure that you're looking after yourself, you're eating well, you're getting enough sleep, you're living a healthy lifestyle. So you're exercising and taking care of yourself. You have positive relationships in your life, all sorts of things that will enable you to be your best.
perfect. So I think, okay, I mean, I want to just relating to this, right? Give me some real time examples, right? But you've been doing coaching, especially on the executive leadership, and all you've done one-on-one coaching too.
Yes.
Give me some real examples. I don't, I mean, you want to take name or probably take name of the organization, but at least what you have sensed. I mean, what are the different types of leaders you have seen, and probably what they have evolved from a coaching, or what are the things which you felt, okay, these were things which the organizations were not focusing on, and they have put an effort, or you still see that as a problem area. I mean, it can be anything. I mean, I just want to understand, probably for the audience, to some real time examples of the
Well, I can
power.
give you some examples of what people come to me
Mm,
with, particularly in one-to-one coaching, and for other types of things as well. I mean, there are three sort of service offerings I have, which is one-to-one coaching, team development, and then women's leadership
yeah.
programs. Those are kind of the three offers
Fit
that,
cafe.
that I have. Yeah. And so for one-to-one coaching, quite often leaders will come to me when they're feeling overwhelmed by things, and they may well be really capable leaders. And I can think of more than one, because I'm kind of got two or three going on in my head, that
Mm,
have come to me very capable and in very senior roles, but for whatever reason feeling really out of sorts, like this isn't
mm,
right for me, maybe even tearful in the first session that we might
mm,
have together, because they're just feeling it's all too much. um, so struggling and maybe moving towards that feeling of stress as well. And I think a thing that a commonality of the clients I work with, and I don't know if it's a result of working with me or whether they're like this anyway, I think it's probably a mixture, is that they're pretty value centered. So
mm,
we talk about purpose, and one of the things I help them get in touch with is what's important to them in terms of how they want to conduct themselves and be the leader that they're being. And that can help reinvigorate them and rebuild their confidence in what they're doing. But I can think of, so I'm thinking of just specific examples here of one leader who was promoted to a very senior position in the organization, and they were struggling with being on that very senior team because they felt so different to the other people in the team.
mm,
And it wasn't that they were a different race or different sex, it was different, just different personalities. So helping them navigate that and find some way of being able to influence was really important for them. And that's what we worked on, as well as part of what we did was their foundation, to make sure because they were finding they got into this new role, which often happens when you're in transition. You get into a more senior role and you're overwhelmed with everything that's coming towards you, and you're working all the hours God sends. And of course, then your well-being starts to suffer. So, a lot of what we did was build this person's well-being back up, but also considered how can they engage and influence this very senior team, so that how the team was behaving and performing aligned more with their values. So it's a really key influencing piece for them around their own personal congruence as well. And I would say that, because I'm a great believer in relational leadership, that actually you can't really be a leader unless you're willing to build relationships with people. So through building those relationships, through really getting to know their colleagues and their line manager, who obviously was a huge, very senior man in the organization, they were then able to increase their ability to influence and make a case for how they felt they should approach an organizational change that was coming up, which they were uncomfortable about. How my particular client was uncomfortable about how the team were going to be approaching it, and he was able to shift
Navigate through
through his
that.
influence so that it was much more engaging for the people they'd be leading through this change. So really about getting him back in touch with what leadership was all about for him and his values, and making sure it was congruent for him.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
then I can think of others where, leaders have found it, there's been a clash of personalities, for example, and then how to navigate that. And that can be both with people they've got on their team, so people that they're leading, or with people more senior in the organization and feeling very isolated in the organization because of that. So all sorts of different dynamics that go on in organizations. And then some of the team issues is all about building trust, creating that psychological safety, those behaviors that will help the team be open with each other and think of themselves. There's a lot of confusion often in organizations about what we mean by team. So say, for example, I'm a director of marketing, but I'm also on the exec team. And I've got, my senior director who leads the whole division, but I'm the director of marketing. I might view my team that I lead as the primary team, but actually that's not how it is. That's my secondary team. It doesn't mean they're not important. Of course, they're really important. But the team that I'm a part of, this executive team, is my primary team.
Okay.
And that's where I need to be loyal. And that's where I need to be considering my colleagues' success is as important as my own success, rather than thinking I compete. So I'm competing with finance, or I'm competing with operations. No, you're all part of a team trying to succeed together. And therefore, and this happens a lot in organizations, that we have diverse objectives. What the ops team is trying to do X and the marketing team is trying to do Y, and they don't align. And you've got to align them at that executive level. Otherwise, that's why you end up with silos in organizations. So that's a very common phenomena I work with in teams. And then from the women's leadership perspective, the issue there is really to do with a lot of organizations. It's about, we have plenty of women, but we've got plenty of women within our workforce, but we've got hardly anyone at senior level. So it's like, how is the organization functioning? What's going on that's stopping women step up? A lot of it is around giving them some tools and things that will practically help them navigate some of the headwinds that women face, which is sometimes, and I've got a workshop coming up specifically on confidence shortly, but that's all about that women often don't think they're confident, and it's not necessarily they're not confident, it's that they just get talked over in meetings. That's a very common phenomena. Or they say something and it gets ignored, and then the man in the room will say something and it gets taken on as a really good idea. So all sorts of biases like that women have to navigate. So the work I do with women is often to help them recognize and navigate those biases. And a lot of the output of what I do with my work with women is they do feel much more confident by the end of that work as well.
Wonderful. Those are really good examples. I mean, very relevant and very, 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 very prevalent. I mean, in your organizations too, actually, right? And
yes.
Sometimes it's more of navigating through that self-doubt, and I think it all ties to that fundamental, the core objective of your book, as well as how you're driving the purpose-driven leadership. Okay, what is your purpose, right? End of day, how you want to exhibit yourself as a leader. What is your purpose of being the leader? What is your core? What is your value system which you bring in, right? That's very, very, sometimes it gets challenged. Sometimes there are places where you probably, because of what you believe in, there are conflicts. But how do you navigate and stand by your values is very important.
Very much so. And because I think life is easier, you know, I do a lot of work with resilience as well, helping leaders with their resilience. And life is always so much easier the more you are living it in tune with your values. So you've got to somehow make that work, because it gives you energy to be doing something that's in tune with your values. If you're doing something that's against your values, it's very draining.
Yeah, I think it's draining, and as well as you will lose the charm. Probably you will also not be happier in terms of what you're delivering, or
Yes.
maybe you're compromising something and you're not putting you're not in
Yeah.
your full potential
Yes.
because you're not you, like, when you're trying to do something for
Yes.
others. So
Yes. Yes.
so
Yes.
that's very, very important as a leader. Yeah, I think very well said. I think your
Yes.
examples are definitely resonating. And talk to me more on the women. I mean, you give few examples, definitely, on what are the self. I mean, especially how to bring the confidence. Right, you have self doubts, and people talk
Yeah.
about. Even the previous conversations I had with Mary, and she talked in her book. She has written specifically, her recommendations on what a parent should do, or versus an organization to do, in terms of looking at reducing the gap, the authority gap.
Yes.
Right. So, how you have seen? I mean, let's say when it comes to you're doing an organizational coaching, and then how has been the pattern? I see.
So,
I think in UK this is very prevalent. I know that, um, especially I saw your post as well on one of the set of questions being asked to a set of men,
oh,
and how
yes, that
yes,
was fascinating.
that's
Yes.
fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. I think people didn't expect such questions, and then
Yeah.
but I've been asked very regularly to
Yeah. Yeah.
any of the women leaders, or people who are in
Yes.
media, right? Yeah. So give me
Yes.
some
So
examples.
there
Or
is something there about what was so powerful about that thing about the questions was that the men that were being asked these questions, like, why aren't you smiling more in meetings, which is a common question women can get asked, is they were surprised that they were being asked it, but also they didn't appreciate these are the sorts of questions that women get asked, or the sorts of remarks that women get made to women. So there's something about the simplicity of just opening men's eyes up to what is it like to be a woman in the workplace. But actually, what I believe in, and this is something I've yet to pursue as something to take into organisations, but it's something I have an aspiration to do, is actually getting men and women dialoguing with
Mm,
each other,
mm,
to actually, and to do it in a safe, psychologically safe space, to be able to say, this is what my experience is like as a woman, but also for men to have that experience to be able to share as well. Because I think there are men, quite often, I'll work in an organization, and we're doing a women in leadership program, which is just for women. And the reason we have that very clearly laid out as just women, because it's to allow the women to have that safe space. Although if men did want to join, we would, but they don't want to join. It's because it's kind of set out as a women's leadership program. But there is something about men often feeling like they have challenges at work as well around some of the dynamics. And I don't know what it's like for you in the US, but in the UK, male suicide, there's a certain age group of men, I think from between 25 and 35, who are the highest rate of suicide. And these are men who everybody thinks are okay, but they're not okay, but they're just not talking about it, and they've got no outlet to go and talk about it. So there are issues that men need to talk about as well. And I think there's something about really understanding each other is the first access to it. So that's why that video I thought was so powerful, because it kind of got the men in it to say, oh God, is this what it's like? So there's something about men and women needing to understand each other better. That would be a really good first step.
true, absolutely. I think, yeah, what more than understanding, also to actually experience. I
Yeah.
think that I gave this from Marianne's book as well, right? There is she, and you also written about it, especially in terms of when you switch roles, and actually when you, what a work which has to be done as a men versus when you do the similar work as
Yes.
women, the amount of time it takes, let's say you're dealing with a customer or a client, the amount of time it takes to actually get things negotiated, the,
Yes.
that's a sea difference
Yes.
in terms of the time or the effort and the complexity it's getting added, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think there was an example about one of the women founders that actually got a men co-founder, which is like non-existential, but still they actually found a name and then just named it as a men name and then started negotiating their deals. And
Yes.
that was fast.
Yes. Oh, there's lots of research like that. So they have CVs that are identical, and one has a man's name and the other has a woman's name, but they're identical, and the
Yeah.
man's gets chosen more often than the woman's. There's all sorts of research like that, which is shocking, really shocking that it still goes on, but it is. There's a lot of change needed.
Yeah, I think people like you spending a lot of time, and I think from with a lot of experience and
Yes.
getting into the UN Commission and talking about it,
Yes.
it is
Yeah.
going to bring that change. And I mean, I think I wanted to also bring the limelight about your best business women award for 2024. Like,
Yes. Oh, thank
that
you.
how did that happen? I really congratulations for that, and it's a great
Thank you
achievement.
so much. Yes. Yeah. I was absolutely thrilled to receive that because they're a national awards here in the UK and they've got a very good reputation. And do you know what? In terms of journey, talk about my own imposter waking up during all of that, because you make your application and you get shortlisted. I would have definitely been upset if I hadn't been shortlisted, but I was really happy to be shortlisted. But the whole way up to the awards themselves, I was like, there's no way I'm going to, because I looked at the field, they were all really strong coaches, really excellent coaches. And I thought, I don't think it's my turn. But it just shows you, don't give up, don't stop believing. Because
Yeah.
lo and behold, there I received that reward, and it was such an honor. And but also in terms of recognizing that, what I'm doing is making a difference. Otherwise, I wouldn't have won the award.
Yep.
It was very affirming from that point of view.
And it also sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's given me more courage. I think I notice in myself, I'm more inclined to, just say it, Mary, rather than thinking, it's like, just say what's important for you to say at this moment. I'm noticing that for myself more as a
Yeah,
result.
I think it also brings an important message to the world,
Yes.
that age is not a barrier,
Yeah.
and um, color is not a barrier or race is not a barrier, uh,
Yes.
right? So being a woman is it's actually a blessing to, and then
Yes.
you have a voice. I think Melinda Gates quote, if I just remember it right, women with voice itself is powerful. Nothing more than
Yes.
that is required.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I mean, I would say just be there and do your 100%. I think
Yes.
rest more for as a byproduct it should follow, and
Yes.
there are a lot of men and women equally to support you on
Yes.
the journey. So I think very. I mean, I know this year you're part of the judge.
I
You're
am, yes.
one
So
of
I
the.
was so impressed with the whole way it was set up. And I was surprised. It felt like, why is there not a best female leader here?
Hmm,
Because it was all different elements of business. And of course, leadership is such an important element of that. So I suggested to Debbie Gilbert, who runs the awards, what about having an award for best female leader? She's like, yes, fantastic. So we just put that together, and I'm sponsoring that, and I'm also a judge on the awards as well. So I'm very excited about that for this
yeah,
year. Yeah.
that's
So
that's
so that's totally, talk about aligning. That is something that completely aligns with what's important to me, because it's the whole gender diversity piece. It's the whole I'm an advocate for leaders, male, female, trans, whatever. I'm an advocate for people that are making a difference in the world. But the way I express it at the moment is very much through supporting women leaders, probably because I'm a woman myself
I
and
think
I know
it's
some of the challenges.
yeah, you were saying that it stands for who you are and the value you.
Yes.
And so you didn't stop. I mean, okay, I got the award, and then I think that it didn't stop you. And then probably the next year, you're trying to make a
No.
change in that whole process and trying to bring a
Yes.
new award, and you part of the panel now, and trying
Yeah.
to bring more, bring more women forward and then
Yeah.
showcase what they have. Yeah, which is
Being proactive in the world, I think, is what it's about. And I'm also a real believer in that. I remember very early on, when I was a much younger facilitator, being with a group who were like, "But what difference can we make?" In that we were doing some assertiveness skills or something. I can't remember what the program was, but what difference can we make, sort of thing. And I used the analogy of ripples, and I still believe in that. That if you go out and make one tiny ripple, that will be a difference. You are making a difference for yourself and for others. And you imagine if everyone starts making ripples, what a tidal wave we can create together. So it is about, if we all take a stand for making the world a better place, we can all do it together, ultimately, by making our own unique ripples.
Yeah, when you said ripples, it sounds me. I think yesterday I was asking my daughter to, hey, today is International Women's Day. I mean, she's 9 year old, and then I told her, okay, and we were just wishing my wife and everybody around, and I said, okay, you write about, what is write about the, how, what message you want to give. And she started
Yes.
writing, and she wrote
Yeah.
like 3 paragraphs. So she brought this, I think she recently they did a research in the school about Malala. She's the, author of the book. She's
Yes.
also in,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
she's also knowing it. So what she did at the age of 15 was so
Amazing.
amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
And my daughter wrote about her in first paragraph, and then she said, we need more Malalas, and to actually help bring, uh,
Yeah.
right. But I think ideally it shouldn't be that way.
Yes.
Education is equal for both. And then what happened there during the war and Pakistan was so disappointing, and it needed a Malala to actually bring
Yes.
education for girls.
Amazing. Just and Malala is what a role model. Fantastic. But also what I want to acknowledge in terms of ripples, the way you're raising your daughter will be creating a ripple. You are contributing to the world by the way you raise your daughter. So
Yeah.
there are so many opportunities to create ripples in many different shapes and forms.
Yeah, I think I want to add to that. That not just strongly, I believe not just the way we raise my daughter, the way I raise my son too makes
Yeah.
a
Oh, yes,
lot of
absolutely.
lot of difference, right? So
Yeah.
I think I strongly believe that uh,
Yeah. Very
it's
much so.
yeah. I mean, I mean, I have been very much inspired by my mother and my grandmother, seeing them independent and work. So
Yes.
that's still I strongly look up to, and my wife too. She's a very strong woman. So
Yes.
I'm inspired by a lot of women throughout my personal and my professional journey. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, I still believe that the system comes from the I mean, the thought process comes from the
Yeah.
family. So
Yeah.
every parent needs to educate their children, especially the boy child, or
Yes.
male or
Yes.
female doesn't make big difference. So it's more of how do you teach them the values. And
Very much so. Very much so. Couldn't agree with you more.
yes, I think I don't know, the time flew so fast. I just
It
looked at it.
has.
I didn't realize it's already an hour. So I'm so happy, and lot of good conversations and
Yes.
learning from you. And I hope you do a lot of much more great work. And I want to
Oh,
really,
thank you.
maybe after you finish the 69th session of UN Commission, we'll do one more discussion to find out what has been your journey on that, and how
Well,
what are
maybe
the
see, yeah, maybe see you this time next year and see what's happening.
yes,
Yes, no,
yes.
it's been a real delight to meet you, Naga, and I really love what you stand for as well. It's great.
Thank you so much, Mary, and all the very best for your UN Commission. Uh, policies make. I hope there are good policies which comes in, and we talk next year, same time.
Okay. Thank you.
And yeah, have a
Bye
good
bye.
evening. Thanks for
All
giving
right.
yourself
Bye
the evening.
bye. Bye.
Bye.